None more than a Big Ten showdown. Penn State versus Wisconsin. When you look at this game, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Wisconsin's picked themselves up off the mat since that game that they had against Alabama to start the year, against USC, the way that they played. They've had a couple of strong performances. Braden Locke filling in for Tyler Van Dyke. He's been a quality player. However, Blake, we can't turn away from the team that's been the more dominant in this upcoming matchup. And I know that I'm kind of turning heel a little bit. I'm changing my opinion on Penn State. This Penn State team. Well, no, I've been supportive of Penn State since my bad takes that I had in week one. They were bad takes. For some reason, Penn State fans think I do not like them. The big thing for me, the two big things we keep talking about with this Penn State squad that's going to give them a huge advantage. The run game is one of the best in the country. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, nobody is able to keep up with those guys, and they're using them, Andy Kotelnicki, in such creative ways. And then secondly, that defense is playing phenomenally. Their front seven, led by Abdul Carter, who's potentially maybe the first overall pick in the upcoming draft. There are not a lot of teams that can move the ball on this defense, can run the ball, can pass the ball. Because of that core, because of that front seven, they're kicking a lot of ass.
Yeah, I mean, look.
Oh, no. What are you going to do? What are you going to say? That pause. The pause. Why? What are you pausing on here?
I saw USC effectively run the football at moments against Penn State, and I'm starting to wonder if Wisconsin can. Now, I don't think it's enough to beat Penn State in the slightest at all, because Wisconsin hasn't been able to stop a nosebleed with a tampon, okay, with how they've been defending the run either. But, Joe, I mean, you got a team that's 35th in the country in run offense. Like they're lining up, and I think what's happened with Wisconsin, as an example, is people watch the Bama game and like, they still suck. Like, okay, they still stink. Hadn't necessarily been the complete case. I mean, they have not been a bad football team when I look at Wisconsin. However, okay, I do think and like Penn State a lot in this one, because I think there's a glaring weakness between Penn State and there's a glaring weakness with Wisconsin. I know that Drew Aller had a couple of pair of interceptions, 3 interceptions against USC. I get that. I don't know if this Wisconsin team is going to test him enough where he's not going to continue to show growth and dominance, right? Like, everybody looks at Penn State is like, let's talk about the running game. And I'm like, yeah, Drew Aller's at moments had some really big throws, right? I get the 3
He's also had some bad ones. He's had some
bad ones. The 3 picks are bad. But he's much more decisive on where he's going with the football than what we saw last year. And I just don't know if Wisconsin is the team, Joe, that can force that action and force their hand to really find out who they are. One thing, though, Wisconsin defensively, outside of the Bama game, and because the defense was on the field so much, Joe, they're a top 15 defense. You would expect it from them. They're one of the top teams in time of possession. I mean, look, they have an air raid style principle offense without the principles of an air raid offense, right? Like, they want to hold on to the football, ironically. They want to bleed the clock. If you look at it from a statistical analysis standpoint, I think Penn State is one of the top 10 teams easily in the country. They've been playing like it. But what team shows up? Like, if you go into USC game and you played bad offensively, you were in a dogfight in that one, and you turn around and you're another dogfight against Wisconsin, then there are going to be some question marks on you.
Wait, but hold on.
One second. Okay. The only reason I'm putting that on Penn State is because we've seen a lot of teams do that this year.
Okay.
Right? Like, a lot of teams have done that this year. Georgia, Bama, Tennessee. I would even make the argument of Oregon in the beginning of the season to what they are now. Teams have had those issues. Is Penn State going to have another one, or are they going to continue to get better?
Well, when I flip that on you, that I don't think there's a truly dominant team that's kicked ass on a week-to-week basis. There has not been a single team that has done that this year. It has been a more balanced season than we've ever seen. I also don't put, and this is what I brought up in our reaction to the USC game, I give Penn State credit for the way that they finished in that game rather than using it as a detraction because of the cross-country travel that they had. and all of the difficulties that go into having to play in Los Angeles coming from Pennsylvania. So I think that credit needs to be given for them. I understand that you're playing at Wisconsin, which is often deemed as a difficult place to play, and many thought that maybe it could be too difficult for Alabama. That didn't come to fruition. What is going to show up, though, is this Wisconsin run defense that if we're comparing two run defenses, Penn State's got beat up by Woody Marks because they were going up against an offense that they typically don't see. An offense that was spreading everybody out. Woody Marks was given a ton of space, and he's a far better athlete and more of a draft prospect than Tawee Walker is. Tawee Walker is a quality player. He's been super productive thus far. He's got 565 yards, but Woody Marks is a lot more explosive. And he is the singular reason why Penn State had issues stopping the run. This Penn State run defense is only allowing 95 yards per game, 3.2 yards per carry, and I think that is commendable compared to Wisconsin, who's giving up almost 140 yards per game. There is a pretty big separation, and I know one team is going to have an easier time running the ball that will open up the rest of their offense. To that final point that you made there, I don't think that there's much in this Wisconsin secondary that's going to challenge Drew Aller unless Drew Aller makes boneheaded mistakes. There is not going to be a corner. Wohler, who's one of their quality safeties that they have, is an above average player, but there are no corners that are going to make big plays and shut him down.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, listen, Wisconsin safety play has been very, how do I want to say this? Scheme correct, right? Like meaning
sure.
When they're getting beat, they're not getting beat because they're not out of position. They're getting beat because a player's better in a certain situation, right? Like they're there. They're just not making the play. And you could say that's execution. But, I mean, Joe, they're seventh in the country in passing yards allowed, and I get that. But it's their safety play. They've been fundamentally correct, as your favorite coach in the country, Brian Kelly, would say. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm with you on Penn State. It's interesting what they have this year. They have a matchup against Ohio State in a couple of weeks, so that's going to be a big one. I'm just really interested to see what they look like after in a high-profile situation, but against another really pretty decent opponent. What do they look like in a following week? Any other thoughts on this game before we move on here?
No, I mean, this is another opportunity for Penn State to continue to build their resume. It's still a road test. It's not going to be like a super tough test, but there's no reason why Penn State should not win this thing by 10 or more points. There is a separation between these two squads and a team that's starting a backup quarterback. Wisconsin has stormed back with a 5-2 record, but we got to remember who some of these wins are against in the past few weeks. They're picking up these dubs against the Northwestern, who they played last week. They beat Rutgers, which ended up not being as good of an opponent as we saw. And then they beat up on Purdue. They're hanging a ton of points on them. Rutgers is probably the best win in that stretch. There's real context here on which team's actually the better in this situation.
I mean, in fairness, if you would have flipped that team and said Wisconsin to Ohio State, you could have kind of made the same analogy on schedule strength.
Yeah, well, okay. No, hold on.
I mean,
but wait. I know what you're saying. But like when we watch them play, that we know that there's a stark difference.
Ohio State. I get you don't want to compare Ohio State and Wisconsin. I'm with you. Don't compare them. However, in some comparison, in some light, right? Like there's a part where you're like, yeah, that's what. So you mean like Ohio State got to do the same thing? I mean, they played Dookie Water State and Trash Water State. I mean, you get what I'm trying to say.
Well, Wisconsin. Yeah, I know what you meant.
Okay.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.